She never imagined her walk into the courthouse would end with a violent blow, one that echoed across the stone steps and froze everyone around her. In an instant, a black woman simply arriving for her day was treated like a threat, dragged and humiliated by the very people sworn to protect those halls. But what none of those officers realized was who she really was. And the moment her true identity surfaced, the entire courtroom and their careers would turn upside down. Because this wasn't just an assault. This was the moment justice decided to hit back. Tell me where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories. For Maya, mornings at the courthouse were nothing new. She had walked those same steps for years, always early, always prepared, always carrying the quiet confidence of a woman who built her career on discipline, dignity, and quiet strength. In her civilian clothes, she blended easily with the flow of workers starting another busy day. But beneath her calm expression was a mind already reviewing the cases ahead, the decisions waiting, and the countless lives depending on fairness she never failed to uphold. Her briefcase, simple, well-used, and filled with documents she reviewed late into the night, hung at her side. To anyone passing by, she looked like just another professional beginning her morning. And that was exactly what she expected this day to be: routine, predictable, nothing out of the ordinary. But the courthouse had changed in recent months. Whispers had started traveling through offices and hallways, quiet complaints, unsettling patterns, troubling stories of officers whose actions drifted far from the principles they were sworn to follow. Maya had noticed it too. Small inconsistencies, familiar phrases repeated in reports, an uncomfortable pattern hiding beneath official paperwork. Something was wrong, and whatever it was getting closer. As Maya approached the entrance, she didn't notice the officer already watching her. She didn't see the way his posture shifted or the judgment forming behind his stare. To him, she didn't look like someone who belonged. His assumptions weren't based on protocol. They were based on prejudice, silent, immediate, and dangerously familiar. That moment of misjudgment would ignite a chain of events powerful enough to shake the courthouse far beyond anything Maya could have imagined. For now, she was just a woman heading to work. She had no idea that within minutes, her true identity would become the most explosive truth in the entire building, and the one thing capable of exposing an entire system from the inside out. Maya was only a few steps from the courthouse doors when the atmosphere around her shifted, subtle at first, like an unseen weight settling on the back of her shoulders. The officer who had been watching her now moved with purpose. His posture tightened, his expression hardened, and something in his eyes shifted from suspicion to hostility. Maya didn't notice it quickly enough. She was still thinking about her morning docket, not danger. But danger saw her. Before she could even adjust her grip on her briefcase, the officer stepped directly into her path. His presence blocked the sunlight, and in a single instant, her ordinary morning dissolved into something darker. His shadow fell across her face, and the courthouse steps suddenly felt colder. She tried to continue forward, but the officer's stance widened, his focus fixed entirely on her as if she were an intruder rather than a woman on her way to work. Other officers nearby glanced over, not with concern but with expectation, as if they'd seen this pattern before, as if they already knew how this moment would unfold. And then it happened. A sudden, violent strike, the kind meant not to warn but to humiliate. The impact snapped her head sideways, and the world tilted in a blur of light and stone. Her briefcase slipped from her hand, files scattering across the concrete like broken pieces of her morning. Gasps rippled through the onlookers, though no one stepped in, no one questioned. The officers who witnessed it didn't react with shock. They reacted with familiarity. As Maya tried to regain her balance, her body was forced against the cold courthouse wall. Panic rushed through her, but so did something else. Disbelief, the kind that comes when people with power decide that someone like her doesn't deserve the benefit of truth or dignity or even humanity. Metal restraints clicked around her wrists, biting into her skin. Her surroundings blurred as other officers gathered closer, not to intervene, but to participate in the narrative being shaped in real time. One that painted her not as a professional on her way to work, but as a threat who needed to be controlled. Her documents, official, confidential, legitimate, were now lifted from the ground and examined with dismissive eyes, treated as stolen rather than owned. Her clothing, her silence, even the color of her skin became evidence against her before she could say a word. Maya was pushed toward the courthouse doors, not as someone who belonged, but as someone being displayed, a message, a warning, a trophy of authority. The same steps she once climbed with purpose were now the steps she was dragged across, watched by people who understood the performance but not the truth. Inside, the fluorescent lights felt harsher, colder. With each hallway she was forced through, whispers followed. Not whispers of concern, whispers of judgment, fueled by lies that had not yet been spoken but were already believed. By the time she was placed in a chair, restrained, bruised, and surrounded by people who viewed her as a problem rather than a person, Maya realized the full reality of what had begun. This wasn't just an accusation. This was a system closing in around her, one designed to protect its own, one that had mistaken her identity, and one that was moments away from revealing the biggest mistake of all. What she did next would turn their world on its head. The courtroom felt nothing like the place Maya had dedicated her life to. The walls she once knew as symbols of justice now watched silently as false reports were written, twisted narratives were accepted, and her bruised face was treated as proof of some invented crime. She sat at the defendant's table, hands cuffed, clothes rumpled, cheeks swollen, while officers who had harmed her stood confidently just a few feet away, shaping a story they believed no one would challenge. The room held its breath as each accusation against her was delivered with certainty, rehearsed precision, and the quiet arrogance of men who had done this to others before. One by one, officers described her as unstable, aggressive, threatening, a woman who didn't belong, a stranger who had forced their hand. Every word built a tower of lies taller than her voice could cut through. But even as the weight of the injustice pressed down on her, Maya's eyes remained steady. Behind the pain, something powerful was growing, a calm, controlled fire that refused to be extinguished. She watched them speak, watched the courtroom believe them, watched the people she had served for years sit silently, unaware of who she really was. The officer who struck her stood proudly, recounting the fabricated version of events, unaware that the truth was already unraveling around him. Hidden in security rooms, in digital archives, in the very systems he trusted, the real story was waiting. Videos, records, and footage he never imagined would surface. And then the shift began. Maya slowly stood, the metal cuffs still cutting into her wrists, but her presence rising higher than anyone expected. The room turned toward her, not with respect, not yet, but with curiosity. The energy changed. The silence deepened. Something was about to break. Because in that moment, Maya was no longer the woman they thought she had cornered. She was the woman they had misjudged. The woman whose identity could dismantle every lie spoken that morning. The woman whose truth could turn this courtroom inside out. And as she prepared to reveal exactly who she was, a ripple of fear finally crossed the officer's face because he sensed what was coming. The moment that would change everything was seconds away. When Maya finally revealed who she was, the courtroom seemed to stop breathing. The officers who once stood tall began sinking into their own shadows as the truth washed over them like a tidal wave. A woman they had dragged, slapped, humiliated, and paraded as a criminal was, in reality, the very figure who upheld the law they claimed to protect. And for the first time that day, silence became heavier than any accusation spoken aloud. The system that had nearly crushed her now had no choice but to face its own reflection. In the days that followed, the truth spread beyond the courthouse walls. Footage emerged, reports were reviewed, patterns of misconduct, once hidden under paperwork and rehearsed testimony, became impossible to ignore. Those who once controlled the narrative found themselves stripped of power, exposed under the same justice they had denied others. Their careers ended not with retirement, but with accountability long overdue. But Maya's impact reached far beyond the downfall of a few officers. Her story ignited a conversation the community could no longer avoid, a conversation about what happens when prejudice disguises itself as authority, when assumptions override identity, and when the people meant to serve become the ones to fear. For Maya, healing came slowly. The bruise on her cheek faded, but the memory of that morning never did. Still, she returned to her bench, stronger, firmer, more determined than ever to protect those who didn't have her position, her influence, or her chance to be heard. She became a quiet symbol of resilience in a system many believed would never change. And for millions watching, Her story was more than a moment of justice. It was a reminder of a painful truth. How many others were judged before they could speak? How many were punished before they were seen? How many were silenced simply for existing? Maya proved that one truth, revealed at the right moment, can shake an entire system. But the real question lingers. How many more stories like hers remain buried, waiting for justice to finally listen?